Hello there, this is Pat Coakley, and welcome to Voices from My Bunker. Because as you know, I've been in quarantine since middle of March. My state of Massachusetts is phase 3, but I'm 75, live alone. I'm sort of still in phase 1. But I interview folks virtually from my living room, ages 13 to 90, and ask them about how they're doing in this year of COVID-19 in 2020 and what they may be looking forward to. Because let's face it, we have to develop a system of things we look forward to. So I'm going to interview my neighbor Carol, who lives alone and who's been battling cancer for 3 years. And the reason I want to share her story is that someone asked me the other day why I'm so conservative in what I will and won't do with respect to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 with Massachusetts. Many more people are looking to me like they're living almost normal lives. And so I launched into the fact that if I were to get ill, the best scenario is that I would be staying home and taking care of myself rather than having to be hospitalized. And I thought, wow, the descriptions of how one gets ill with this and how it lingers really scares me as to whether I could even take care of myself. And nor could I ask or expect anyone in my family or friend department to come and help me because they would then be put at risk. So I think fundamentally this is the reason that I take this still so seriously starting my 5th month. So I think listening to Carol was very helpful to me in terms of just realizing that we may have strengths that we don't know we have until we're challenged. So I called her up. She's literally a stone's throw away from me, but I called her up and recorded the interview. And the first question I asked her was, how are you feeling?
I feel better. And then I'm right back in another cycle where I'm feeling shitty again. And, that's the hard part, is that there's no end to it. It doesn't end. So
how anyway. Often are the treatments?
It's every 4 weeks.
Every 4 weeks. And then,
yep. And then
how long does it take you to sort of get back to feeling sort of human?
Well, it's at least a week.
Wow.
And depending on the cycle, each cycle seems to be a little bit different. And so, usually it's a week now that it's every 4 weeks.
Okay.
We got messed up with this whole COVID thing, and I had to miss out on one of my regular appointments and got a week off, and then they had to catch up. And that was hard because my body hadn't had a chance to recover at all before I was right back in another cycle. And so that was a hard one for me, and I had to go in and have transfusions and stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Wow. Well, can you roll back the video machine back to January? And when did you first hear about the COVID issue at all, even though it wasn't impacting, your situation? When did it come into your awareness?
Well, I follow MSNBC, and I have WBUR on all day long.
Okay.
And so they were picking up on this right away, when this first started coming out of China. And so I was aware of it as soon as these more progressive newscasters were starting to talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I follow carefully, what's happening in the world.
And so as of January, were you going through your treatments? I know you've had for several years different treatments, and
I've never had a break. So it's been almost 3 years now that I've been in constant chemo.
Wow.
Almost 3 years.
Wow.
Isn't that awful? Oh.
Well, it does sound awful. Yes, it does.
It is. Well, trust me, it is awful.
Yeah. So the current
treatment. I'm still alive. So that's
yes, you are.
That's the kicker. Is that I'm still alive. So for that, I'm grateful.
Yeah. Are the treatments you're going through now different ones than you've been on in the past 3 years?
Yeah, I was on. I have lung cancer, and it just so happens that there were 2 targeted drugs that had been approved for the mutation that I have. And it's a mutation that is common in women who don't smoke.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, I was on the first one for almost a year, maybe 8-9 months, and there were terrible side effects to it. And the side effects were mostly impacting my skin, which is really hard because I had these boils all over my skin. Oh. And there for a while, I had to roll a towel under my head at night because I couldn't even have my scalp touch the pillow.
Wow.
It was horrible. I think back and I think, oh my God. But I was so intent on having, having these tumors attacked, that I was willing to continue. And so finally my doctor said, we can't continue.
Yeah.
So he put me on the second one, and I was on that one for about a year. And then it was last summer that one stopped working, and the tumors all started growing again. So this more traditional IV chemo is the last thing for them to try. And it's palliative only, so I know that I'm living on borrowed time here. And but I've been on this now since last fall.
Okay.
And last fall was really awful. I was so sick, and I had to have chemo every 3 weeks. And my body never got a chance to recover from one to the next. And so last fall was the worst. It was just awful. And I finally told my oncologist I couldn't live that way.
Yeah.
We're talking quality of life here. And I had maybe 6-7 days each cycle where I felt halfway human.
Oh boy.
And and that's no way to live.
Yeah.
So he put me on this every 4 weeks, and he took away one of the more general chemo therapies.
Yeah.
And I'm just getting one now that is specific for lung cancer. And so I've been doing better. I have about a week each month where I feel like shit. And then the rest of the time, other than being totally exhausted and falling asleep every time I sit down and try to read, I'm actually okay. And so anyway.
It's an improvement, at least as far as your quality of life from last fall.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so anyway, that's kind of the way it is. But I'll tell you, this whole thing has really put a lot of things in perspective for me, Pat. And I am so grateful for all of the wonderful things that are in my life, And when you have this kind of end in sight there,
it's
it really does help to pull things into perspective. And I am so lucky to have an intact family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my kids and their kids, my grandchildren, they're wonderful. We're able to sit down and have long conversations, and they'll do anything for me.
Are you able to visit with them in the past few months?
Have I been what?
Able to visit with them the past few months?
Yeah, I was totally isolated for the first, 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
And then finally, I'm such a tactile person, and I'm a hugger. And finally, I said, my daughter was over changing my bed linens one day, and her daughter, Lexi, who's 9, was with her. And finally, I said, Lexi, I can't live like this. I need a hug.
Uh-huh.
And she came over and she fell into my arms, and we hugged and hugged and hugged. And it was the best thing in the world for me,
Yeah.
And so we decided that we would make a family circle,
Yeah.
And so my daughter's family can come, and my son and his family come.
Okay.
So, so that's what we do.
So for 6 weeks, you couldn't have that experience, though.
Well, I mean, everything seems so intense at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
And and so I was being really careful, and I have a lot of people who are supporting me here, which is the other thing I'm so grateful for. I've got this wide support network through all my years in ministry here.
Right.
And most of the people in the church still love me, and they'll do anything for me.
Yeah.
And that is so great. They take care of have you been back to see my gardens back here?
I haven't been in the back, no.
But you should take a walk over sometime, because my gardens are just fabulous. They brought in all these annuals and perennials. They move perennials around.
I'll be over with my camera for sure.
Yeah, come over sometime.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and they bring me food, and they'll cook for me sometimes. They'll say, "Oh, Carol, I just am making chicken marsala. Can I bring you some?" I'll say, "Sure."
Yeah.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've got all of that. But at those first few weeks, we were all so careful, washing down groceries when they came in, and,
right.
All that kind of stuff. And then I just kind of thought, oh, shoot, I'm not going to do that. So
what has your doctor advised you about this whole COVID?
Well, as things have progressed here, they know that I'm with my family.
Yeah.
And that's just fine. That's just fine. My daughter-in-law is an ophthalmologist, and she's continued, to telehealth mostly with her patients.
Yeah.
But she has to see some patients, but she was just tested this past weekend, and she's negative.
Okay.
And my daughter is still working. She does addiction counseling.
Okay.
And she's a social worker, and so she still goes into the office, but most of that is also telehealth.
Okay.
So she's not seeing many patients.
Right.
So anyway, but we're all kind of doing it. So
let me ask you this: sir, go ahead. I'll come back after you finish.
Well, I tend to be a little bit relaxed about it, and like Terry has started coming back to clean for me.
Yes.
And I social distance, and I take care of my hands, and I'm careful in most ways, but I'm not going to get crazy about it.
Yep.
Yeah. And some of that, I guess, is, I have a nursing background. I was a nurse, worked as a registered nurse for 15 years before I went into the ministry. And so I've seen so much, as I know you have too. And I guess I'm just more relaxed about the way our lives unfold.
Well, you know
and besides,
what?
I think I'm going to die anyway. So,
well, I was just going to say, you're dealing with a horizon that I think allows you to take some relaxation along the way.
Well, the thing is, I think, oh, well, I'm going to die here one of these days. I mean, we all are going to die one of these days, but it's a little bit clearer for me.
Yeah.
And I've told my kids that if I get this COVID, they are not to take me to the hospital.
Right.
Because I want my family with me when I die.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that's the
So you really let it be known to them how.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not how I want my life to end. So my kids know that they're supposed to leave me here, even if I'm gasping for breath.
But they're part of your bubble, so they'll be able to come in and hold your hand.
Right.
So that is good. Do you know? Well, not do you know, but what would you tell people that who live with others and have gone through this COVID quarantine and are now in varying stages of restarting or reopening their life? What would you say they may not know about someone who is living alone and going through this exact same thing and also ill at the same time? What might they not be quite aware of that they might benefit from knowing from someone who's in that experience?
Well, Pat, just living alone, period, is something that most people don't understand, and
right.
You know that,
right?
Too.
Yeah.
I've been divorced for, excuse me, over 30 years now. So I've been alone for a long time, and because I'm in communication with so many different people, I have two women from my church who are recent widows, and both were kind of premature deaths. And I've had them both over here to sit out on my patio at different times. And just for them, to understand, start to get a feel for what it's like to be alone. Yeah. I mean, that's really huge, whether it's a divorce or if you have been used to a partnered type relationship. I think people who have never been in a partnered relationship know what that's like.
Yeah.
But for people who are new to it, it's very, very different when you realize you have to make all your decisions on your own. Everything that happens in your house, you have to do, whether it's taking the trash out or
right.
getting the oil changed in the car or whatever.
Right.
There's no one but you. And that is huge. And especially if you have kids, and are trying to do this. So the being sick has just amplified all of that feeling of aloneness.
Has there been things that have been, I wish someone could just do X for me or Y for me? What are some of those things?
I wish I had somebody who could rub my shoulders for me.
Okay. All right. All right.
Yes, I want a massage person
okay.
to live with me and keep my shoulders relaxed. And when I'm sitting here, reading the newspaper or whatever, I'd like somebody to bring me a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Or ask me if I'd like something. Can I get something for you when I'm up? Those are the little things.
Yes.
Yes. And especially when I'm sick. The other night when I was so sick, I couldn't get out of bed. And I didn't have water at the bedside or anything. And I couldn't move, And so, thank goodness, Kathleen was on her way home from work. So she came over and got me set up with a pan to vomit into.
Wow.
And water with a straw so I could have it at the bedside.
Right.
But those are the hard things.
Wow, and imagine someone in your exact situation without a Kathleen to call.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Well, this is why I feel so grateful.
Yeah, I understand that.
That I've got my kids and I've got other people who will do anything for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And boy, so many people don't have that.
Have you
Most people don't.
have you been at all along with the feeling of being blessed in ways and grateful? Has there been any disappointments with this period of time when you would have thought something and it didn't happen, or someone wasn't showing up in the way that you might have thought they would have? Have there been any sort of disappointments that you've experienced?
Not really with those kinds of things.
Okay. Other sorts of things?
But when I was first divorced, I had a big talk with myself and told myself that I was not going to ask for things from my children, that I was going to allow them to live their lives, and I wouldn't have any expectations. My daughter, after college and volunteer work, she came back and lived with me for 2 years. And it was great. We were like roommates and supported each other and stuff. And my son also tried living with me for a while when he got out of college. And that didn't work so well, But I didn't have expectations of them. And this is the way it is now. I don't expect them to come and do things for me. I wait for them to offer usually.
Yeah.
And then I just cover them with praise for taking such good care of me.
Yeah.
So, but it's my own expectations of what people will do or won't do. And so I don't have expectations that people will do things for me.
Wow.
And I'm just grateful when they do,
Not too many people have no expectations of people, so I'm like slack-jawed at that. But I believe you. I believe you, but I find it really hard to imagine it, frankly, to have no expectations. Although it's certainly a way to go, because then you're just grateful for what you do receive and don't dwell on what you don't. Have you been surprised about yourself or disappointed in yourself in any way in these last few months?
When this whole thing first unfolded, I was, I spent 35 years preaching, and I preached a lot about death and all of that, mortality and making meaning out of life, and what is your life's purpose, and and so when I got sick like this, because I had just retired, and I thought, oh shit,
right,
this isn't what I thought my retirement was going to be. And I thought, I wonder if what I've been preaching for decades to my congregation will sustain me through this.
Yeah.
And so I started rereading sermons
that you had given,
that I'd written. Yeah. And I found myself being ministered to by my own sermons. That it really was it was true for me what I had been preaching. And that was nice.
And so you've reread some of those in the past few months?
Well, in the past 3 years.
Oh, in the past 3 years. Okay.
Yeah, since I've been sick. And so anyway, but I also started thinking more about my legacy. Now, I have this huge legacy through the church because I saved this congregation, and it's a thriving, flourishing congregation out there doing all this good work now.
Yeah.
And the congregation was homeless, and there were only 20 people when I first went there. And I really did save that church. And we, bought land, and it was an old historic church, but it almost died. And so the people in that church look at me as being, I was the one that saved the church.
Yeah.
I was the one that built the church. So I have that legacy there. And it will probably always be there because I had such a high profile for so long there. But the other part of the legacy is through my family.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about, what do I want my legacy with them to be? Because they're really the most important ones. And so I started being very intentional about interacting with my grandchildren and telling them stories and, sharing my life with them. And I picked up a crochet hook and I started crocheting, and I have now crocheted 5 Afghans.
Oh.
I made an Afghan for each of my granddaughters and for my son and for my daughter. And, and because I thought, this is something tangible,
Absolutely.
that they can hang on to, knowing that Grandma had made these for them. And I went through my cookbooks and all of my old family recipes, and I made cookbooks for both my son and for my daughter so they would have access to all the family recipes.
Okay.
And I went through hundreds of thousands of photographs and got them all sorted, threw out most of them, and made photo albums for both families. This is your life type of thing. So I was doing all of that as a way of, I guess, having something tangible for them.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we remember Grandma Carol. She was something else.
And you did that prior to the whole quarantine business, right? This has been the course of 3 years. You've been
This has been going on for 3 years.
Yeah. When the COVID quarantine hit, and it was coinciding with you also being so ill for a week out of each of the months, did the legacy issues, both in the church and in your family, help you get through those horrible weeks in terms of you still felt like you were going to be teaching them how to bear something so unbearable? How did that work?
Well, I was upset when I was sitting here in quarantine. I was kind of pissed off,
Okay.
because I kept thinking, this really sucks.
Yeah.
Am I going to live the rest of my life in quarantine?
Yeah.
Is this the way the rest of my life is going to unfold?
Yeah.
Boy, I didn't have this. It wasn't part of my game plan.
Yeah.
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 So, I was used to being alone. You and I are both used to being alone. And so that wasn't as big a deal. And I had people who were doing things for me, so I wasn't suffering in any way. But it was that, oh, God, is this how it's going to end?
Yeah.
Not being able to hug my grandchildren and not being able to go out and do this and do that and, not being able to go back to the MFA again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was kind of pissed off.
What did you do with the pissed offness?
Well, I'm a reflective person, and so, I kind of work it through. And the thing is, I've got a couple. I've got especially one really, really good friend who's a retired minister, and she's living up in Maine now. But to have a good friend who's not your kids.
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference, because I can say things to these two friends that I can't say to my kids because they're too emotionally involved in it. Right. Yeah.
Right.
So, but being able to talk to a good friend, gosh, what's better than that?
So you had that outlet at least when you were being aware of the limitations of this, having an illness amidst a pandemic, which just sounds like a Hollywood script would be rejected as, oh no, that's just too unbelievable.
Well, I have to tell you, though, that the other thing is that my oncologist started me on antidepressants And I've never been on antidepressants or anything like that, although I'm on a lot of other stuff for a lot of other things. But
Yeah.
I told him it was probably in February. It was probably in February, just as this was all unfolding, that that every time I started talking to people, I cried. And I said, this isn't like me,
Yeah.
I don't cry all the time.
Right.
And he said, well, I think you need an antidepressant. I said, I've never been on an antidepressant,
Yeah.
but it made a big difference.
Did it really? Okay.
Yeah,
So-
it made a big difference. And so I'm on an antidepressant. And when I'm start to feel sorry for myself, I'm able to say, oh, Carol, get a grip.
Yeah.
Other people have it a hell of a lot worse than you do.
Well, that's interesting, Carol, that sometimes those words that we toss around rather easily, like, well, somebody's life is worse than ours, so, we have to put on our big girl pants and, just keep on going. It seems to me that this is a period of time where all of us have sort of skirted around that as what we should be doing, but we're not always able to get beyond what's going on. But you seem to have been able to strike a balance that you attribute to your, I guess, just general philosophy about how to live your life, as well as the affections you have in your life that have sustained you. Is there anything that, if someone is going to listen to this down the line, and they know of someone who's in a similar situation, is there anything that they can do? They can't be in your bubble, obviously, but is there something that they could do to bear witness to your life in a way that would be meaningful and not a cliche?
Yeah. Well, I think that just, pure presence is the biggest thing.
Okay.
If you can be present for people, people don't need platitudes, and I didn't need somebody else to tell me to suck it up, Carol.
Right.
That goes over like a lead balloon.
Really? Have people said that to you?
No, but I was just thinking,
Wow.
I can say those things to myself, but boy, I sure don't want to have somebody else tell me.
Oh boy.
Oh, Carol, somebody else has it a lot worse than you do.
I know. So you can use that phrase, but God forbid someone else should say it.
Yeah. Because, all you have to do is open up your eyes and know how fortunate we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially the last 3 weeks, with all of the demonstrations that are going on.
Yeah.
And now that, so many more white people are starting to wake up a little bit, I have had a very complicated life, but boy, it has, I have learned so much going through my life, and with the profession that I was in, I had to do a lot of self-reflection. Every week I was having to write a sermon,
right.
sermon,
right,
and that kind of forces you to do a lot of interior work every week. And so, I am aware of all of the pain and the really horrible suffering that so many people are going through. And I am so aware of how lucky I've been.
The name of this podcast is So what's next on your fun agenda for 2020? And it's a combination of my sarcasm and also sense of hope that's always welded together. And I wondered, when you look out for the rest of 2020, what is on your fun agenda?
Well, I've been telling my oncologist for the past 3 years that my main goal was to live long enough to see Donald Trump out of office.
Amen. Amen, sister.
And so that has been that's been the thing. I have to live long enough. And then I start thinking, oh my God, what if he gets reelected?
Yeah.
And then,
yeah, we just can't go beyond November 3rd. We really can't.
I keep thinking, I have to wait to see him out of office. I want to see the 4-star generals escorting him out of the White House.
So that's on the fun agenda then for the anything else?
Yeah.
Anything else that you're looking forward to with this gradual, hopefully successful reopening?
Well, I hope that I live long enough to see things opening up, and I hope that I live long enough to see a vaccine come in. And I've been really worried about the kids, and what this is doing to them developmentally and all that kind of stuff, especially for the younger girls. And I feel so sorry for these little kids who are being not being allowed to socialize in the way they need to,
Yeah.
And so anyway, it will be good to see all of that. But the thing is, Pat, we never live long enough to see the end of the story.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that's so true. I love that. I love that. And you know what? I'm going to end on that because I think that is true for all of us, regardless of where we are in our life or what struggles we're facing. So thank you so much for this. I appreciate it.
I've enjoyed talking to you, Pat.
Really. And you do have a radio voice, just saying.
Oh, good.
All right. Thanks, dear.
All right, my dear.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So you can see why I think Carol's story was a good one to start off with. Because despite her challenges, and I don't think any one of us are going to argue that she's got some challenges, she ends our interview with, Pat, the thing is we never live long enough to see the end of the story. I just love that. And I'm going to think about it. I hope you do too. And I hope you come back to listen to another story and to another answer to what's next on your fun agenda for 2020. Although I have to say, you're really going to have to surprise me to give me a better one than Carol's, which was telling her doctor she just needed him to keep her alive until Trump was defeated. Okay. Thanks for listening. I can be reached at www.patcoakley.com. I have an archive of blog posts going back to 2009 with some gaps in between, but they started up again in January 2020, and I invite you to take a look. Take care. And a grateful shout out to Jeff Hale, who created my new doorbell. Thank you, Jeff. Take care of yourselves.